Welcome to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. We want to encourage, equip, and connect those with a passion to impact the next generation for Jesus Christ. Student ministry can be a lonely place. You might even feel like you're the only one in your church or community that cares about students. Well, know this, you're not alone. People all across the country are engaging Gen Z and care deeply about the spiritual direction of these young men and women. Whether you're full-time, part-time, bivocational, or volunteer, if you have a heart for students, this is the place for you.
Well, welcome to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. My name is Dan Carson, and today I have with me my two co-hosts, Micah Powell.
Hey guys, what's up?
And Chris Vines.
Hey everybody.
Well, we're thrilled that you've chosen to download and listen as we continue the conversation about student ministry. And if you're needing someone to talk to about your ministry role and maybe some of the struggles that you're facing right now, we'd love for you to reach out. Talking with you, sharing with you, just listening are some of the things that we can do. And you can find us at info@studentministrymatters.com. That's a great way to get in touch with us. You can also find other contact information in our show notes. You'll see those things there. Now, as we close in on January, getting closer, it's a natural slowdown in student ministry. It may only be for a moment, but it does present some time to read. And you might be getting some Amazon gift cards from the family and church members that you want to spend. So tonight, we're going to talk about some of our favorite books in the realm of ministry and of Christian life. But before we get to that, we want to get to our random question of the week. Let these guys talk a little bit and see what's on their brains. So let me ask this question. Favorite Christmas movie? What do you think, Micah? You got a favorite Christmas movie?
Yeah, probably Elf. I just love Will Ferrell. I think he's hilarious. Actually, I'm so sorry. My wife would kill me if I said that out loud just then. No. My all-time favorite is How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey. I'm sorry. Elf is right there with it, probably.
How about you, Chris?
You serious, Clark? Man, everybody loves some National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's all-time favorite for me.
Oh my
Close
gosh,
second is going to be the Santa Claus with Tim Allen.
These are good ones, guys. I'll have to say, because I've got to watch all of those at Christmas time. So I think I'll throw out It's a Wonderful Life just because it's a good one.
Yeah,
but my other one,
and you're 100,
and I'm 100. But The Christmas Story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You'll shoot your eye out.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. I'll sit and watch that as many times as I can get away with. So, well, Christmas is close. That's one of the reasons we're talking about Christmas movies. And again, we want to talk about books tonight. I know that may seem a little off topic, but really it's not. If we're going to be lifelong learners, if we're going to grow in our understanding of what God wants of us, we start with the Word. Of course, that is our favorite book. So check that off. We'll put that on top of the list for everybody. The Word should be our favorite book that we always go to and look to. But there are some things that we can be reading that are going to help us with ministry, that are going to help us in our walk and help us grow. And so we just wanted to take a few minutes tonight and share some of our favorites. So we're going to share 5 each. We're going to kind of go around the circle. So just to let you know, if you don't have a pencil and paper with you, I don't have a way to write these things down, don't worry. We're going to put our lists in the show notes so that you can go back. I may even put a link if I can find some of these books. Some of mine are older. I know that some of the other ones that the guys have shared with me are old on the older side as well, but we'll try to point you in the right direction. So, well, let's go ahead and get started. We're just going to kind of go around the bend. Chris, let's start with you. What's the first book you got on your list?
Man, I like good biographies, and one of the best one out there, and there's going to be people that listen to this that have obviously read a little bit more widely than me. So I would love to hear from you guys out there who are also avid readers. But my first one is a book called Spurgeon by Arnold Dallimore. It's a biography on Charles Spurgeon, and just a really good book. Arnold Dallimore is a great author, does a great job of writing several different biographies, and he does a great job on this one about Charles Spurgeon.
Nice. I know Micah is is getting the Spurgeon experience, being up there at Midwestern in the Spurgeon Library and seeing some of those things. But Micah, what's your first book on your list?
Man, first book. Gosh, I just threw down on a list like a list of 5.
You bet.
Man, it's so tough to pick one of them. I think I'm just gonna go with my gut here, and I'm just gonna say the lectures to my students books. That was on my list, and because Chris mentioned Spurgeon, I'm just gonna go ahead and I had to read that this semester, and I've actually went back and read it again and wrote down some quotes in just a journal of mine. Just wonderful, practical, and it can be tough to read, but man, it was just so good. Charles talking to his students about just things of ministry and how people that he rubbed shoulders with in his early time ministry, and like how he formulates sermons and how he preaches, and just kind of how he maintains his rigorous or just big load of ministry and balancing family, and he's a big proponent of adoption. And so like I mean there were so many things in that book that just really were helpful for me and grew me spiritually.
I have a copy of lectures to my students on my bookcase, and I've yet to read it. And right now I'm looking at all the books I have to read for school right now. I'm thinking, well, I'll get to that after those papers are done. So I'm glad you mentioned it, because I want to give that one a shot. Well, the first one I have on my list, and really any of these 5 would be on the top. The first one is by Howard Hendricks. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
It's a book called Teaching to Change Lives.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It is a fantastic book on just the ability to teach and to teach in a Christian manner. I actually ran across a couple of copies of this in the Mardell Christian Supply bargain section. And so I bought a couple of them, and I can't find any of them except for one. So I must have given them away to people. And so if you're looking for just a great book on teaching, whether you are a Sunday school teacher, volunteer, wherever you find yourself, this is a great one to look at.
He also wrote Living by the Book, right?
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
A little bit bigger book, more involved, but yeah, also a good one. So anyway.
Yeah, I've got that. And there's another book, Iron Sharpens Iron. Basically, I started hunting down any book that I could find. I saw him on a series of videos that were just about teaching, and I thought, this guy is the greatest thing. And he was funny, and it comes across in his books too. So, well, yeah, Chris,
he was Dallas Theological too, wasn't he?
I'm sorry. Yes. He was at Dallas Theological. Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, Chris, what's your second book?
The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. By the way, these are not in any particular order. I'm like Mike, I wrote these down. But yeah, The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. It had a big impact on me, and anyway, I definitely recommend it.
When did you read it? Just out of curiosity.
Oh goodness, this particular one wasn't very long ago. I think the first Tozer book I read was Knowledge of the Holy. I think this one I read maybe within the last couple of years.
Micah, how about you? Second book.
Holiness by R.C. Ryle. That was really good. I just finished that one like a couple days ago, and it's high in my list. So I would have given it first, but I just read it. So I was like, yeah, it can't be my first one. So yeah, J.C. Ryle, Holiness, just living out your Christian life and the pursuit of holiness. And that's just, a lot of people don't know what to do with that. And I think he does a great job of just working through it and what the cost is, what it really is to live a life holy and separate, set apart for Christ. And it just was really super helpful. Tons of highlights in it. I think in fact, there's probably more of the book that's not highlighted for me than it was. So like, I'm gonna have to go back through and actually like change the color of my highlighter, just so to be like, oh, well, that statement was a very highlighted.
Here's the really important stuff.
So. Yeah, and then go back through it again and choose a different color. Just have the rainbow in there.
Yeah, I find myself doing the same thing, especially now when I read them with my Kindle. I'm like, okay, I just highlighted that whole chapter, so what do I do? So, well, my second book is Sing by Keith and Kristyn Getty. They shared just a little book. I mean, it's really about maybe 120 to 150 pages at most, but it talks about the responsibility of the church to sing. And if you are a worship pastor, that kind of falls under your responsibilities, man, this is a little book you need to read and then get your church to read in that process. I absolutely adore this. I've always been a proponent of us expressing ourselves musically in worship services and as we come together, but I never pieced together this fact that we are singing one to another in the same way that I got it when I was reading this. And so it's a good one. Well, Chris, number 3, what you got?
Number 3 for me, The Sovereignty of God by A.W. Pink. Pretty weighty book, potentially I guess in some senses could be a divisive book, but nonetheless a very good book.
Micah, you're number 3.
Probably Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. That was really, golly, if I've ever half lived, it was before I read the book. And it's not the gospel. Not what I have to say alluding to, but nothing in our world is worth taking place of Christ. Like just nothing is, and that was something really impactful. In fact, and my probably next book or my summer reads. I go through kind of a list of. I pick a random book out of my stack of books for my summer reads. I have usually 10 or 15 in a stack of books somebody recommended or books that I loved and reread them, and that's in there for me. Great book.
That's good, man. That's good. I've never been one to go back and reread a book that much. The difference is that my next book, and that's The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer, that Chris has already mentioned. It was one of those books that hit me at a very specific time and just kind of wrecked my world. My understanding of who I was before God and who He is. It was an assignment. Dr. Martin Jameson was serving as my instructor for an internship at Temple Baptist Church of Little Rock. And he gave me a stack of books and said, this is what I want you to read over these next 6 weeks. And then we'll talk about them. I want you to go through them. And so I'd spend part of my time each day reading, and man, I think everybody should read that book now. So, and it's not an easy read. Tozer isn't exactly light reading, but it's one of those classics similar to Mere Christianity, some of these others that we've already mentioned that are just good, solid books to read. All right, Chris, number 4.
So number 4 for me is The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul. This, again, was a very impactful book for me. I read it, it was probably 7 or 8 years ago for me. Anyway, very, very good book. There's a lot of R.C. Sproul books that I've enjoyed. This is just one that made the list for tonight.
That's good. Micah, number 4.
I need more time to think through this because I'm looking at my library and my laptop of things I have in here, and I know I picked 5 and I sent them to you, but I'm just like, now I'm looking back and I'm going, oh no, like I think I have a problem. I think on the ministry side of things, like instead of just being like a personal read that I go back through, that's like for my Christian soul, like which I love, a part of my Christian soul that I can't separate from is my pastoral ministry that God called me to. I can't. My Christian walk is Christian walk, but built within that is the pastoral ministry. And the one that I just was so helpful, man, was The Christian Ministry by Charles Bridges. It was dense. It's substance. I mean, it was just so deep, and it took me forever to kind of learn the way his thoughts flowed to be able to kind of get comfortable reading it. But man, that book just blew my mind on the biblical kind of expectations of a pastor and like how we should view the Christian ministry. And it just, instead of just the normal statements of, well, that's a higher calling, and, well, the pastor is supposed to be the pastor, and just the things I heard my whole life. I went to that book and it was like, there was, 380 pages of things, of statements that the pastor's life, that make up the pastor's life. And he just does a phenomenal job. In fact, somebody asked Mark Dever one time, hey, would you write a book on Christian ministry? He said, why? It's already been written. And there's no need to write another one. And he references the Christian ministry. And yeah, that is the book of books for men wanting to go into the ministry and trying to discern their call. And it's just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Well, my next book is much newer than I think anything that we've mentioned so far. It is one that I've just recently read and gone through, and it's really kind of with the student ministry worker in mind. I was just really impressed by Fulfill Your Student Ministry that was edited by Sam Bierig. He's the dean at Spurgeon College. Jared Bumpers is one of the other writers that's in there, David Bronson, and then a host of others as they share some different things and I just like the way it was laid out. It was very straightforward. Here is what we hope that you'll accomplish in your student ministry. Here's a way to do it, some practical things. Man, I could go on, but I would love to see our student ministry workers get a copy of that in their hand as they attempt to outline good biblical student ministry. So much of what we've done, at least in the past, and I'm not going to speak about, or speak to everybody who's out here, but too much in the past has been about activity and for activity's sake. And we don't want to be just attractional. We want to have a gospel impact. And that's one of the things that was really evident in that book. It was a good one. Well, Chris, number 5. What I see something a little different on your list. What is that?
I want to throw this one here because a lot of these books are books that have had an impact on me, but also ones that I think each person needs to read. This one's Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey.
Nice.
Man, I don't know if I'm gonna make friends or make enemies with a book kind of like this, but nonetheless, especially if you are a young guy, a young married person, or a young single person, I think this is a book that you need to read. And you may not agree with Dave on everything, but he's certainly someone you need to listen to, and you need to learn how to manage your money and think about those kind of things. And I've found that this book has influenced not just my personal life, but also how I manage a youth budget, and how I think about spending and not spending and all those kind of things in a ministry aspect. And so just a lot of good, just life principles about money in this book that I think each person should glean from.
Man, that is so important. And especially if you're listening and you're starting out, get some of these things right at the beginning. Because if you're at my age at 48 and still trying to figure them out personally or ministry-wise, man, it is a big headache. So get those things right from the start and do what you can. It's just going to help in the long term. Well, Micah, we're down to number 5, and there's a handful of books on your list that you haven't even covered yet. So,
yep, it changed. The more I was thinking on it, so guys, if you're wondering what list we had, so Dan, we kind of talked through the topic for tonight, and Chris and I sent him generally like 5 books that we just really enjoyed and loved. And now just thinking about it, I'm like, man, in the Christian ministry, like there's 40 books. And so I'm having to go back and go, that was a great book, but this like really helped me, Micah, like in my growth, personal growth as a leader. And most of these books I've mentioned smoked me. Like I almost didn't enjoy them. They were great, but they like almost like hurt my feelings. Like it was about how like much I needed to know, about how little I knew of God or how little I knew of what I was doing. And Chris kind of alluded that with his book on Dave Ramsey. And so I covered at least, I think I've covered 2 of the books on here. So Brothers Were Not Professional will be my last one. And I would rather change its place with another John Piper book, but that's okay. We Are Not Professionals by John Piper was a phenomenal book, especially the expanded version of it, not the first version, the one that he wrote a while back, but the one that he expands even further on, because this professionalism, this not just the suit and tie, that's not rather the only aspect of this, but just that American Western civilization is just really try to take the pulpit by storm in the pastor's office. Is this professionalism? Is this, is your pastor professional? I just really like my professor because he's professional. Like, this is really, he speaks to this. And every young man or new person in the student ministry involved in leadership, that's a great book that can like help you through joy, being a leader in joy, and finding joy in leadership, and not as like positional authority, but as something that's like a great service, and kind of how to protect formulate your life, or put your life, putting it at the right thing and on the right focus. That was a really good book. I enjoyed it, but it's by John Piper.
Well, my last one of our top 5, and we're going to get to some honorable mentions here in just a second. But my top 5 is a book by Thom Rainer and Eric Geiger entitled Simple Church. And I think one of the reasons that it meant a lot to me as I read it, it helped strip away some of the things that have just kind of grown in churches that aren't necessarily necessary. And as you talk, and as you look, and as you think about what is important in church, man, it gets right down to the heart of things. Discipleship, worship, knowing the word. I mean, and when we add all these other things in, while they may be good things and they may be fun things and not unbiblical, we want to focus in on the most important. And so that's one of the reasons that I really liked Simple Church by Thom Rainer and Eric Geiger. Well, again, I mentioned we're going to have some honorable mentions. So, Chris, I know you've got a couple here, and so just mention those short, all 3 of them, or however many you want to mention at once, and tell us why they're on that list.
Sure. So I know we've said this, but just to reiterate it again, this list is not necessarily it's not a comprehensive list. These are books that have been very impactful in my life, and there's many more. I think a good podcast for us to do in the future, guys, would be maybe a top 10 books that every youth pastor should read, or every person should read. And so that's a completely different subject. But my 3 honorable mentions that I wanted to bring up for tonight would be the first one is Classic Christianity by Bob George. This is an easy read. It's not one that I found that many people know about, but it's one that, again, had a big impact on me when I think about just how to live the Christian life. And so that's Classic Christianity by Bob George. The second one is Sit, Walk, Stand by Watchman Nee. Again, had a huge impact on me. Not a very long book. Again, a pretty easy read, but this little book here will, in my opinion, really rock your world in a good way. And then the third one is actually a pretty new one for me. I've had it on my list to read, and I picked it up about a week ago, and I read it, and really good. It's called 8 Hours or Less: How to Write Faithful Sermons Faster, and it's by a guy named Ryan Huguley, I think is how you say his name. And I'll be honest, I did not get this book for a while because of the title.
Right.
Because when you're thinking about preaching and you're thinking about being, anytime it just says 8 hours or less, you're almost like, okay, he's trying to sell me on something, and and it's probably not worth my time. And so, but nonetheless, I got it on sale, and let me just tell you, this book it's faithful to the process of preaching. And Ryan, the author, is a church planner, and so really the idea behind it is, we all as pastors, preachers of the word, have been in that situation where we just, the week can just get away from us. And sometimes we just feel like we're spinning our wheels when it comes to preparing a sermon. It feels like we spend way too much time on one particular thing, or maybe we don't have any kind of process at all. And Ryan does a great job of really explaining what a faithful sermon looks like, and then giving very clear action steps on how to spend the right amount of time, on each step in that process as he lays it out. And so I think for anybody who's just starting out in ministry and is trying to get a handle on how to prepare sermons, without having to go to seminary or anything like that, this is a great primer. It's a great book to start with. There's many other preaching books that, believe me, I would put on a list far above this one, but this one's just very condensed, easy to read. I've spent a lot of time talking about it because I really think it's a great book, and I think it'd be helpful for anybody out there listening who wants to learn how to just really hone in on how to prepare a sermon in an efficient time span from Monday through Friday. So Ryan Huguley, 8 hours or less, that'd be my third honorable mention.
I like that one. I mean, I know that all of us who serve in the church in a staff position have other responsibilities on our plate. And sometimes the lead will say, all right, I need you to preach, and trying to fit that in with some of those other things that we do can be a challenge. And so I'm anxious to take a look at that myself. Well, Micah, I know you've got some others that you'd like to mention. What, you got 2 or 3 that would be honorable mentions?
Sure. I think a really good practical one that people would be, I think, really blessed to read would be The Explicit Gospel by Matt Chandler and Jared Wilson. That was really good, really helpful in my walk, and just really good. I really remember it being helped me affirm my faith and kind of wake up a little bit in some of my slumber and trying to love the Lord and the things that get in the way between me and Him. And that was a really good book, kind of for my Christian soul. And then I think probably 2 others I think that I would probably say were really helpful. One was Pastoral Ministry by John MacArthur. It's definitely weighty and really helpful for the people out there that just love ministering to people, and what the life of a shepherd is supposed to look like in the pastoral ministry. It's a really good book, guys. It's just a phenomenal read, helpful. You'll find your highlighter will be wore out. You'll need to go through packs of highlighters and re-highlight and go back and re-highlight again. And it's just a great book by John MacArthur, of course. And probably the last one would be On Being a Pastor, Alistair Begg and Derek Prime. That was really good because it's actually 2 guys collaborating and about their ministries and what they do in their priorities differently, and kind of scripturally how they back up what they do, and it's really, really helpful for leaders trying to gain right priorities. If you find yourself at the end of each day going, man, I didn't get half of what I needed to done, it's just like Dave Ramsey's budgeting with money and using money functionally and well, as Chris mentioned earlier. These guys kind of go through an efficient pastor's life, but not in a professionalistic way, just in a gospel way where not wasting our life, but being pointed and putting time and stock in the right thing in pastoral ministry as leaders in the home life, and not being lazy dads, and just letting our kids sit in front of anything, and they go through a lot of these topics, and that was just really helpful for my soul. And that's by Alistair Begg and Derek Prime. It's a great book.
Well, I have a few on the honorable mention that I'll just quickly go over. Some of them you may be familiar with, others you may not. Sacred Pathways by Gary Thomas is a great book. It talks about different ways that people connect to God, and some connect with God through nature the best. Some connect God through expressions of worship, and there are several different things that he talks about. It's a great way for you to understand yourself a little bit better in that connecting with God. Now, that doesn't set aside the word or the things that we know that are the disciplines of the faith, but it is a great book to read. Another book that is kind of out there for everybody is Radical by David Platt. I mean, it is something that everybody should at least, and it's a quick read, fast read, and a powerful read. I know that our missions office for a while was encouraging those going on summer mission trips to read that book before they went. I think it's a powerful book for you or your students that you're working with. Another one is, and this is a little bit different, is recommended by Dr. Martin Jameson as well. When I hit a crossroads in my ministry, it's called Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome by Kent and Barbara Hughes. And this is a little bit older book, but it talks about some of those things that we deal with in ministry and trying to evaluate, are we winning at this or are we failing? and what that really should look like. Another great one is Autopsy of a Deceased Church by Thom. And that's great for anybody in the church to read. It'll open up your eyes if your church is in a plateaued or declining state. And then one of my favorites is by a guy that I've listened to a lot on his podcast, Revitalize and Replant, is Reclaiming Glory by Mark Clifton. And so again, it's that same sort of idea of church revitalization. And it's just kind of some of the stuff that I've been reading over the past few years, but just some great books. And that's really, what we wanted to share tonight. Were just books that right now have been impacting our lives. We have our top list, and then we've got some honorable mentions. There are just so many books out there that we can be reading. Sometimes we just need some direction of where to start. And that can be confusing. And if you're like where we're at here in Northwest Arkansas, up until just a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have a Christian bookstore at all. For years, we had Lifeway, and we had Family Christian and others, the smaller ones, and then they all shut down. And so now someone is trying to start one up here, and we're excited about that. But it's harder now. And I think it places a greater responsibility on us in ministry to be readers so that we can recommend things to our families, to our students, to church members. If you're in a lead pastor position, man, it's incredibly important. Saying, hey, I want you to read this, or I encourage you to read that. And so finding good ministry books, good books about the Christian life can be a bit of a challenge. But I think these guys will agree that we want to be lifelong learners. And to be lifelong learners, we've got to be readers. Were you guys readers as kids? Did you enjoy books? Chris, what about you?
Yes, to a certain degree. I didn't read just a ton. I started reading a little bit in high school. I would read more than, I guess, a normal teenager, but don't let that deceive you into thinking that I was reading a lot of books. And so and for the longest time, I've been in school for a long time. I was reading books that were assigned to me. And so, I'm not a fast reader. And so I'm not someone who can handle a lot of books in a short amount of time very easily. And so that kind of affected me. So I didn't read just a ton in college outside of what was being assigned to me. And that's something I wanted to encourage some of our listeners with is, we're giving you guys books that have been impactful in our lives. And I certainly recommend these books. But there is something to be said about the freedom of not trying to read just somebody else's list of books, but to read the books that the Lord draws you to. And I've found that whenever I pick up a book that's just interesting to me, that I want to read that. Maybe I've heard it mentioned before, but it's just one that just sticks out to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to read that. And then you start paying attention to who that author is quoting and who that author is referring to in the books that he or she is reading. And you allow that to inform your own list. And again, there's a lot of freedom in that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't read from other book lists and even like the ones that we've given you today, but there is some freedom in you reading that which is interesting to you and which is even necessary for you in this moment. And I've also been told this before, and it's very true. Not every book that you pick up is worth finishing. And so there's some freedom in that as well. There's a lot of them out there that you need to finish for sure, but not every book is worth finishing. So I didn't learn that until just, really a couple of years ago to know that, it's okay for me to close this book, put it down, and not really ever pick it up again. And that might make some people cringe. To me, it allows me to be free to read other things that I want to read.
I completely understand that statement. And I believe it. I know it is true. The completionist in me has trouble doing that.
Yeah, totally.
and I've got a book. I've read up to this point, but it's hard for me to set it aside. Now, most of those books that I find myself in that situation aren't necessarily fiction. The story, it's not like I got up to a certain point in the story and said, I'm just bored. But it's usually information or different things. So, yeah, that's good. Micah, how about you? When did you start reading?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
August this year. Guys, I'm just, and I think few people know this about me, but some people may know this, but I didn't read at all in high school. I didn't like to read when I was a kid. I struggled reading the Bible big time. Knew I was supposed to, felt led to, and the more I opened a KJV Bible, the more I could not relate to Christ that spoke to me, ironically, from an era that was completely outside of my understanding. What I still thought that betwixt just meant that, like, be a Twix. I didn't know that it actually was a word in English. So like I was really jaded kind of in a way. And just sports, like I was really involved in sports and stuff, and music and church life and serving and things like that, teaching. And so like, I don't know, I guess I was so energetic, obviously, that I just did a lot of other things. And like, I read basically what I needed to function well and pass with a B, and didn't have to try really hard. Being here has been really helpful for me because it's made me appreciate reading more. And I read a lot at CBC as well, but nothing like I've read this semester. I mean, just books that are being completed are just, I didn't know that you could complete books. And I'm not a completionist. Like I'm a formulated reader. So I'm sure you guys, maybe if you resonate with this, I don't know if you do this, but when you read, some people are like, they have to finish the book, within a time frame, or that, they just have to finish one book before they begin another. I will read 5 generally, like around 5 sometimes at once, where at my desk at Park Place, I would sit down and there'd be a stack of books I hadn't, finished. And I would start reading a couple chapters, and I'd kind of generally not get bored, I would say, but just kind of like formulate what I kind of thought the book was about, and then I would stop and kind of let my mind rest and then go into a different book. And that's kind of how I've read for 32 years, kind of. So, but just here recently, really been focused and appreciated the time to read. So,
reading is one of those things that not everybody is comfortable with. We're aware of that. We know that. But we also know that that's one of the ways that information is transmitted and information is gained and knowledge is learned is by reading and taking in concepts and thinking about those and mulling them over. If you struggle with reading, I would encourage you to find something that you can still do. And that means something like Audible or Christian audiobooks. There are some ways out there, and I'll put a note or a link in the show notes in regard to this, but there is a Christian audiobooks website that gives away 1 free book every month. And you can listen to those in your car while you're working out or mowing the lawn. There's a lot of ways, but we just want to encourage you to read, to find that area, those places that you can get passionate about as you grow. And that's what we want. And that's what your students need. They need you to be growing and understanding of who you are in your relationship with Christ and how you're serving him. And so we just want to encourage you tonight to keep doing that, keep working hard, keep serving, and keep reading. Why do we do all of these things? Well, because student ministry matters.
Thanks for listening to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. Get connected at studentministrymatters.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Student Ministry Matters. Until next time, keep up the great work with your students because the work matters.